Okay. Let's start. Ready? Jurian? Okay.
I am. Yeah.
I see the last ones are joining in. Let me just start. So welcome everybody for now and to this webinar again. Jurian from Zone. Thank you for joining and having me here, or thank us for having the webinar again. The second one, it's a follow-up from the Zone approvals webinar we had a couple of months ago. Today it's we're trying to show how zone approvals and zone capture, why it works so nicely together. Jurian will run the show later on. I just like to quickly share a few updates about Altavia again for those ones who don't know me. Altavia is a solution provider, the first one in the DACH region since 2009. We're also an SDN partner, so we develop apps just like Zone. We have our growing team from up to 50 people now. I think it's 49 now since yesterday, who are all employed with us. So we are not outsourcing our services. That's important. So we are able to deliver also the services that we have with partners, just like Zone, to have functional expertise. Here you can see there the growth of the team from 2021 to 2022. Here we go. So we doubled the size then. And in 2022 we also started these partnership selling model very much. And Zone and us, we have, or Fast4 and us, we have a very, very, very long history, as you can see. We know each other very well. I see Anna is in the call as well. Hi, Anna. And so the main reason why we are doing this is, we want to be the first level partner for you customers if we have something to support you with, and that's why we have this growing team as well. So today I would say my thinking of what you should remember is, can I streamline my AP process any further? And Jurian is trying to show this in his show later on. If you go to the last slide, Jurian, I'd like to mention the last info that's important. We have the European NetSuite User Days coming up in November in Nuremberg. Please make a note of these 2 days. We will have 18 to 27 sessions to be talked about from customers and partners. Only the truth about NetSuite. You can't get more. Please go to netsuite.doag.org and save your early bird and see who the partners is and stay in touch. With that, I'll just go over to Jurian and be quiet now.
Yeah, cool, Martin. Thank you so much for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. So my name is Jurian from Maanen. I'm the VP of Sales at Zone&Co for the EMEA region. And first of all, Martin, thank you for inviting me once again to host this session. This is the agenda that we'll be covering today. So I'm going to start to talk a little bit about Zone as a company, our mission in life, and what we do with our native SuiteApps, and explain you a little bit about what are native SuiteApps. Then we're going to look at two of our main applications. So we'll look at zone capture, zone approval. I'll give you sort of a short background on both of those, and then the main event for today is that I'll show you a live product demonstration. And after that, we'll have a short Q&A and a wrap up. And for the Q&A, my question is, please use the Q&A functionality of Zoom. If there's any questions where we're like, okay, we need to cover that right away, or my audio is not working, my video is not working, Martin will jump in and ask that question during the session. Any functional questions we'll save until after the demo, and then I'll make sure that I'll go over any question that came up. So Zone&Co, who are we? We're a team of, let's say, NetSuite enthusiasts. So we are NetSuite consultants, accountants, ex-NetSuite administrators, developers. And our mission in life is to enhance the NetSuite experience of finance professionals using NetSuite. And the way that we do it is we build applications on top of NetSuite. So we call those native SuiteApps. And I thought it's interesting to start a little bit with why and what are those native SuiteApps? Because if you want to make the life of financial professionals easier, of course, you can build a completely separate tool, a separate application. You can integrate it with NetSuite. But what NetSuite offers that's really unique is the build for NetSuite Suite Cloud platform. So I think most of you, maybe all of you, if you've worked with NetSuite, you will have seen this sort of overview before. It shows all the functionality that NetSuite offers. And what's really unique is this Suite Cloud platform that's part of NetSuite, because that allows customers, but also parties like us, to extend NetSuite functionality. So to build records on it, to utilize scripts on top of it. And with that functionality, you can build complex and complete applications. And those we call native SuiteApps. So they're completely part of your NetSuite environment. For the end user, you wouldn't even really be able to see what's NetSuite functionality and what has been added by those applications. And we believe that that has some major benefits to it. Like I could probably go over a list of 20, but for time's sakes, I narrowed it down to these 4. First of all, you have everything in one system. And like lots of NetSuite customers, they choose to work with NetSuite because they like that. They like to have the idea to have as much possible in a single system, to not have to deal with integrations, learning new systems. That's a huge benefit of utilizing native SuiteApps. It's also really efficient because we're built on top of NetSuite, we utilize all the setup that already exists in your NetSuite account. So to start using our apps, you really just install a bundle. Everything that's already there from your ERP setup, we utilize it, and you can get really quick and fast return on investment on the applications you use. Very secure. Like everyone purchasing NetSuite will go through like a process of verifying that the NetSuite infrastructure is up to their requirements. That's absolutely top class. We piggy bank on that, so to speak. We utilize that exact same infrastructure, and it gives you a unified experience. So everything that we do with our apps becomes part of your NetSuite environment, right? So any reporting, any dashboards, anything that you would want to build in NetSuite, you can also use the data that we add with our applications. Now, we liked that so much, we started building a whole library of those native SuiteApps. So the 2 in the middle are the ones that we'll focus on today. I wanted to highlight a couple of other ones, like Zone Billing, an application that can handle pretty much any type of billing scenarios that you might want to manage in NetSuite. Zone Payments are applications for connecting with payment service providers. Zone Reconcile, which automates bank processing, and Zone Reporting, which acts as a fully pre-built Power BI integration. Very recently, we announced also the acquisition of a company called Infinite Cloud. I did not yet fully incorporate it into this presentation. They focus on payrolling for certain key NetSuite markets. So have a look at our website and that acquisition news to know a little bit also more about what that will add to our portfolio. Now, what we try to do with all our application is to make them work seamlessly together, and also to make them enhance each other. So the more of them you use, the more powerful functionality you get. So some examples are, if you use Zone Billing and Zone Payments, you can also trigger payment links straight from subscription records that you create in Zone Billing. Or if you use Zone Reconcile and ZoneApprovals, then you can auto-approve certain transactions that were created by Zone Reconcile, because these apps understand how they work. So I want to zoom in on one particular example and today show how Zone Capture and ZoneApprovals actually work together to fully automate and enhance your end-to-end accounts payable process. So the 2 apps that I'm going to cover, just a very small background before we go into the product demonstration. Zone Capture. Zone Capture is our AP automation app. So it automates the creation of vendor bill and credits, and we use intelligent document processing, in essence, to pick the information up from a PDF file and automate your transaction creation. These are some main characteristics of this app. It is, of course, a native Suite application. We have three-way matching functionality. We add split screen functionality to NetSuite. We think that's key to manage that process in the right way. A lot of emphasis on UI experience and optimizing the end user experience. I'll show you that. And clickable auto learning functionality. And then ZoneApprovals ties in really well with that process because it allows you to configure approval workflows. And the idea around ZoneApprovals is that we make that process really easy. So you could also do this with like a NetSuite workflow. It tends to be a bit more complex. You need some more technical resources to handle that. ZoneApproval makes it really easy. It offers a ton of functionality that I'll show you to make the actual approval process a breeze, both in NetSuite. There's also an integrated approval by email functionality. We take away the need for manual chasing, so easy dashboard reminders. A pain point that we heard from a lot of customers is that sometimes approvals get stuck because someone might be out of office. So we built in functionality for this. We call that the substitute matrix. And everything you do with approvals is fully visible, completely locked. So reporting your approval processes also becomes a very easy thing to do. So enough slides. I think the best way to look at that is to see it in action. So let me switch over to my NetSuite dashboard and get rid of my Zoom portlet. So in this NetSuite demo account, I have all our apps installed, and hopefully you can see that we add functionality. So here we have the ZoneApproval dashboard. That's what I mentioned before, right? Like where you can track exactly how many transactions are pending your approvals. Do you have overdue transactions? This is our Zone Capture portlet. So here you see we have an incoming queue of transactions ready for process to us. So think of this as the PDFs that you've emailed to NetSuite, or maybe you auto forwarded those emails to NetSuite. Those PDFs then get automatically captured and processed and are ready for you to be reviewed here. And I want to walk you through a scenario where we're going to process an incoming bill, and that bill needs to be approved by other people in the company. Like imagine that budgets are pretty much done for those type of expenses. We want to make absolutely sure that that gets approved before it's paid out. And we need both of our applications for this. So I'm going to start with making sure that that approval process will run correctly once we process that bill. So to do that, I go to my menu here and I'm going to navigate to ZoneApprovals. Now, what I've done, knowing myself, I've pre-created already the approval matrix that we're going to use today, just to make sure that I don't misclick anything. But I do want to show you how easy it is to create those from scratch. So if I go to ZoneApprovals, I go to approvals matrix and new. Let me just walk you through how that works. So we get to this screen. This is our approval matrix. The first thing we do is we define for which subsidiary is this matrix running. So I can choose here one subsidiary. I can also do create one matrix for multiple subsidiaries or even all if you want. I choose the transaction type on which we're running this approval logic. So these are currently the transaction types supported. I'll look at that later on also in my presentation. We'll look at some roadmap items. Please know that we will keep expanding this list in the course of the year. We choose a currency because later on we're going to define our approvers and we're going to use amount thresholds in that, and we need to understand in what currency context we're looking at those amounts. And I'm going to choose an approval hierarchy. So approval hierarchy, you can create as many as you want. And if I click on one, you see what that does. It basically adds the level of approvals that you want to configure within this logic and what the amounts are tied to those levels. So in this case, you see we have 3. If I would pick another one, let's just pick this one. You can see that this completely changes. Right now there's 4 levels and there's an always approve and the amount are slightly different. You can create as many as you want here to make sure you can cover your exact use case. I can select the start date and an end date. Start date is when this logic becomes active. End date is not mandatory. You could use it. Let's say if you want approval logic to only be applicable for a certain period of time, maybe for, I don't know, the holiday period, you want higher thresholds, you could define that and make sure that it automatically starts and automatically ends. Then it's a matter of me drag and dropping in the criteria for my approval. So you can see here that we can use any segment for that. We can use any custom segment. You also have the ability to use GL impact as a criteria, and you can combine them. So I could say, okay, I want to, let's say, use departments and classes. I drag and drop those in. As soon as I've dragged and dropped those in, you can see I now have the options to configure my approvers. So when I click on that, it will ask me to define my criteria. In this case, it will default to any. When I open that, I can see I can choose any class, I can choose any department. And then here I can define who will be the approvers for these scenarios. And there we have quite a few different options. So you can choose a sourced approver. I will use that also when we go through my example. But this would be like a vendor approver, or maybe someone that you defined on an employee record. That would tend to be a supervisor. I can configure NetSuite groups to be available here. That's just a checkbox that you would check when you create that group. That means that you could use logic, right? And say, okay, these people are part of that group. They should be routed as the approvers in this case. I can use role-based approval or go the traditional route and just select an individual employee. I could map this all out, save the matrix, and the logic would then be ready to go. So as you can see, it's really drag and drop, no technical knowledge required whatsoever. Now, I created this one that we're going to use for our example. So this is an approval matrix running on the German subsidiary. You can see we're going to run that on the bill transaction type. And what I've defined is that if on the lines of the transactions, we will find a finance department, I will need to be the approver. If it's the consultancy department, it's going to go to a role, a controller. And for any scenario, we want to make sure that the person marked as the vendor approval will get that approval request routed. So with that all set up, let's go and look at our second application. So I'm going to click on my incoming queue and open my zone capture screen. Now, this is a screen, as you can see, looks pretty different than standard NetSuite. For me, it also really shows how far you can go with building these native applications. And we did that because there's a lot of additional functionality that we can drive here. For example, if I look at all these bills that are ready for me to process, you can see one of them is grayed out. That means that another user, probably one of my colleagues, is using that example right now. They're working on it. And to avoid that I also start processing it, you can see that it's locked, right? That I cannot do anything with that. That's completely real time. So it's monitoring that at all time. And if someone is already working on the transaction, I won't be able to. The interface allows us a few other things as well. You can do things like, if you want to shift the columns around, you can do that in a really easy manner. You can sort them. It tells me whether or not this transaction is ready for processing. What that means is it's basically checking if we have the required information to start bill creation. And what we need for that is a subsidiary and a supplier. And you can see our tool automatically, when creating the booking recommendation based on the data in the NetSuite account, has already connected those. Now, that's major because it means that because they come in already with those labels completely taken care of by the system, you could actually create separate processing queues for people to just see their relevant subsidiaries, their relevant suppliers. We support purchase order billing. Like, I won't go through that in too much detail. I'll also explain later today. We're going to introduce some new functionality around 3-way matching. I'll make sure we'll do a separate session once that's available. For now, we'll focus on what we call a standalone billing process, but please know that we fully support also the billing of purchase orders. And the final thing that I would like to point out, if I scroll to the right here, you see that we have a system alert column where the system actually checks, are there any records in this list that are duplicate? And that can either be that it's duplicate because that document number already exists in this list, or that we found a transaction in NetSuite that already has that transaction number. If I click on it, you see like a nice little window pops up. I can have a look at what that transaction is, why it's duplicate, but also there again, we'll just avoid you from processing the same transaction twice. Now I'm going to use this filter functionality, and I just want to look at my German subsidiary. And this is the test bill that I'm going to process. Now, I can always have a quick click on my PDF preview here, just to make sure that this is actually the right one that I want to process. It is. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the process button. That will pop up in a new window. And you will then also see our split screen in action. This is what I mentioned before, right? One of the things that we add, I think really crucial for this process. And another thing that you can hopefully see is that all the information on the right-hand side has been populated. So has been captured from the PDF and has been has pre-filled the bill transaction in NetSuite. There's some additional nice functionality here. One is like if I click on this field, like the reference number field, you can see we highlight here exactly where that field is coming from. So if you just want to double check it, but you have a hard time finding it on the bill, that's an easy way to solve that. It's also good to know that you can map information from the PDF into NetSuite. So if I click on a field here, and I would click on a field here, let's say the IBAN number, you see it automatically populated here. This is self-learning. So if I would save this bill, the next time a bill comes in, it would actually repeat that mapping. So you can really build that logic out to run automatically. We have line level recognition. So if I go to this step, you can see here that I have 2 lines on my incoming bill. I have a text line as well, but our tool was able to identify those 2 individual lines. It was able to select the right text code. So in a perfect world, I would really just check left and right. If everything's okay, I hit the save button and we would be good to go. What you also see happening here is we have a column called matching rule applied. So you can configure logic in ZoneCapture where you say, if there's a certain keyword or a certain phrase on the line level, then process that line like this. This is what we've done for this transaction. So you can see that because it found those matching rules, the GL accounts have been selected, but not only that, also the departments have been selected. And of course, this is really important if you remember, because we've used that as the value for our approval logic. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this bill transaction. Give that a moment to load and I'll take a sip of water. Transaction is being saved and I can see that it's pending approval and I have a submit for approval button available. So I'm going to hit that button so that I can want to submit it for our approval process. It's good to know that within Zone Approvals, we always have a 2-step approach there. So this will allow the user to still review the bill, make sure that everything was processed correctly before submitting it for approval, because if it would be submitted automatically and you would have maybe forgotten to select the department, the routing would not be correct. Perfect. So I can see a red flag, a yellow flag is showing up telling me that it's been rerouted for approval. And in essence, now our approval application is taking over and does a lot of different things. First thing you can see is I've been selected as the next approver based on those departments that we've selected here. Because I've been selected as the next approver, you also see that I have these approval options available straight away. There's quite a few more things happening. If I go to my Zone Approval step here, you can see that for every single step of this approval, a step has already been created. So I can see exactly how many levels of approvals we need to go through, who, and also why, right? Like for example, if I look at the 3rd approver here, my colleague Barbara, I can see that she was selected because we selected this sourced approver option in our matrix. So all of that is immediately visible from moment 1. Another thing that we do, which I do want to point out, is we have functionality to post accruals. So here you can see based on the configuration for the subsidiary that accrual posting has been enabled based on the the settings we put there, we would actually create an accrual booking a day before month-end close. But for any transactions that are not yet approved, you might know that those that not post automatically into your GL account on NetSuite, we automate that process for you, and we make sure that if you want, we can create those accrual postings as soon as the transactions are created. So let's go through some of these approval steps. Now, here we have a couple of options, and I want to highlight a few. Like, we have an option to redirect approval. So let's say I need to approve this, but I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't have been the approver here. It should have been my colleague. I can choose to click redirect approval. That will bring me to this screen where I could say, actually, Amy needs to approve, and I can give a reason why Amy is the one that needs to approve. It will then show up on her list in her dashboard. It will be redirected to her. Again, that will be locked, right? So it will be visible that I took that action. I could reject the transaction. If I reject, it's mandatory for me to enter a rejection reason. On approving, that's optional. So I can configure whether or not I want an approval reason to be mandatory. In this case, I've not selected that option, so I can simply click the approve button to give my approval. And then we see that it's now been rerouted into the second step of the approval process, right? Which is our role-based approval for the controller role. You can also see that even though I'm administrator, my buttons disappeared. So I no longer have the option to approve this. Luckily, I'm well prepared for this scenario because I gave myself also the controller option. So I'm going to just switch roles. And I prepared a dashboard here when I can see, okay, now I'm logged in as controller. Therefore, that transaction is now rerouted to me for approval. I can open it up, and here again works exactly the same way, right? Because I switch role, I now have the option here to redirect, reject, and approve. I'm going to hit the approve button so we can go to the third step of the process. Okay, 1 second. There we go. Final approver has been rerouted. Barbara, again, my options disappear. I'm going to click back to my previous role. I'm going to reopen up this bill transaction. Because this scenario will give me a few more additional things to show you. In this case, it rerouted to Barbara. I have no option now to approve that. But as we mentioned, sometimes that's not what you want, right? Because this transaction can get stuck. So we have a couple of additional features that can help with that. And I can show you those by navigating to my employee record, because we have some settings that are driven from what we defined here under our zone approval step. Now, here you can see a few different ones. I want to also highlight this one. So you can see my user has been enabled for approval by email. And I did want to make sure that I still show you this. So as we went through these approval steps, I did that sort of manually from the transaction base. But if I go to the communication step, you can see that also emails were triggered because both me and my colleague were enabled for approval by email. So what that functionality does, it will send out an email message with basically any template that you would like, right? We have a few standard ones available, but you can customize this in any way you see fit. Because again, our apps work together and we created this bill with Zone Capture. We know where to find the original PDF on the vendor record. So that has actually been attached to this email. And also we attach a PDF of the printout, right? So that you can check if it was also booked in the same way as the PDF received. The way this works is a user could reply to this email message with a keyword. You can define those keywords. So you could say approve or reject. You can configure that on a subsidiary basis. So if you want those keyword responses to be language specific, that's possible. And then based on the keyword that the user replies, the transaction would be either approved or rejected. Completely outside of NetSuite, you don't even need a NetSuite user necessarily to do that. Go back to the employee. Two other things I want to show here. This is this delegation functionality that I also mentioned during my intro. So if someone is out of office, for a period of time, you could configure an approval delegate. Basically, you would say this person, let's use Amy again, in this period of time, say from June 28th till June 30th, will be the delegate. Then any pending approvals will be routed to that person, but also any new approvals coming in will be rerouted again to the delegate. When the period ends, everything is reverted back to the original approver. And yet again, all of that is locked, right? So if I look at those ZoneApproval records, you will see that there's also a column for delegation where I could actually see that this person didn't approve, but the delegate approved. One other thing I wanted to highlight here is the functionality of the super approver. So you see I have an option here to mark myself as a super approver. If I do so, and I save, and I go back to the build transaction, that super approval option will give me the power to overwrite any type of approval. So because I've now selected myself as a super approval, when I refresh, I see that all my options are back here, right? So I could now go ahead and approve this. If I approve as a super approver, then I always need to provide a reason. And overwriting because whatever. Hit OK. And as with all the other steps, right, you would also be able to see that it was actually an override and that it wasn't approved by the original person. So we walked through all the steps. You can see the bill has now been fully approved and transaction is now open, and we can go ahead and process payments. So that's the overview I wanted to give. Now, before heading back to the slide deck, there are a few, because like there's honestly so much that approvals can do. I cannot fit it all into one singular run through, but there are a couple that I still wanted to highlight, so you are aware we have functionality for that as well. The way for me to show you, if I go to ZoneApprovals and I go to a configuration record, here is where we can define per subsidiary how we want approval to act for that particular subsidiary. So here you can, for example, also see those strings, right? And that we've defined those with language specific values. Now, two things that I still wanted to mention is you have the ability, I didn't do that for this demo, but you have the ability to lock transactions both during an approval process and also after. So then you wouldn't be able to make edits unless you define certain exclusions for that, right? So you could say this user or this role is still able to edit. And another feature that we recently launched is a threshold allowance. That means what you can do is you can say, okay, those transactions are locked, but certain people can still make changes. But if they make changes that are larger than a certain percentage or larger than a certain fixed amount, then that should always automatically re-trigger the approval process. Final piece, also a brand new addition, is we just launched a bulk approval screen. So next to doing approvals on a transaction to transaction basis and approval by email, we also introduced a bulk approval feature. Now, keep in mind, I just selected my employee as a super approver, right? Which means that I can override any approval, which is why when I now open the screen, you will see a lot of different transactions pending, but it works well for my use case. Normally, of course, it would just show your transactions, but you can see, you get an overview here of basically all transactions that you can approve. You could open up like a little drop down where you can get an insight into what are the details of the transactions. Go through these, go, okay, approve, approve, reject, reject. If you want to give an approval reason or a rejection reason, you can simply add that in this column, rejected because ABC. Go through all of these, hit submit, and you will be able to create approval, an approval impact for each transaction selected here, all from a single screen across all transactions. So I think a really valuable new addition to the application. So let's jump back into my slide deck, and I wanted to wrap up with a look ahead on a few additional things that we will be adding to these applications. So I've narrowed it down to the 4 main ones. The top 3 for zone approvals. We're working on budget-based approval functionality for zone approvals, meaning that you can configure, let's say, amount for a certain budget and then use that into your approval logic. So you could say, hey, if my budget has been reached, right, if this transaction exceeds it, then do an extra reroutal of approval to this particular person. We're gonna introduce custom field support. So what does that mean? You saw at the beginning when I configured the matrix that I could use their custom segment and GL accounts, right? Sort of as your approval criteria. That we will extend to cover any type of custom field that you have available in the system. So you're not just limited to segments, you can also use other custom fields. Third one, we will keep working on expanding the supported transaction type. So I showed you that list that we are able to support now. With each new zone approval release, we're going to be adding new transaction types to that. Eventually, our aim is to really support every transaction type, and after that, even custom records as well for approval routing. And the biggest, the biggest next thing coming up for zone capture is we're completely revamping the way that our 3-way matching functionality works. And so the check between bill, item, receipt, and purchase order. That's going to be major, really advanced functionality. Expected to launch during the course of the summer. We'll make sure we'll still do a separate session when that time comes to really run through that in the appropriate way. So before giving the word back to Martin, and I like taking a couple of remaining minutes to go over any questions, I did want to point out one thing, especially for customers attending today's webinar or people watching this recording. We have a special offer. We have a version available of Zone Approval that you can use free of charge. Some terms and conditions apply and some functionality limitations apply. But I think a really good way to sort of try the application out, see if it would work for your use cases. If that's of interest, please contact Martin after the session. He will be able to give you some more details and also help you with taking the next steps there. So again, honestly, would like to as many people as possible to try this application for themselves. I think that's also the best way to get the value. So please reach out to Martin if that's of interest to you. So all right. I'll leave it there, Martin. I know we have 5 minutes left. Did we have any questions come up that I can still help with?
Maybe you open up the Q&A button yourself, because Thomas from Pires asked a few questions and another one entered by Anya as well.
Let's start I'll go.
Can you read it?
Yeah, in the email for approved by Zone, is there no link direct to the transaction which needs to approve? This is part for now by NetSuite, like approvals of POs. I think you can customize the template, Thomas, to include a link to that transaction as well. When it comes to the actual approval action, it needs to be a reply. We do that for security reasons, so we can verify that it was also sent by the same email address as the person that needs to approve. So there you're not able to click a link or a button. You would need to reply. Will any conflict with rules marked with SSO? Maybe you can give some further details to that one, Thomas, or contact me, because I'm not entirely sure what, I guess you mean single sign. I'm not entirely sure what the context of that question is. So maybe either clarify it below or let's pick it up after the session. I'm happy to walk you through it. The incoming invoices need only one PDF doc. Is there a function where I can digitally connect the bill and a separate timesheet in the same email? Yeah, the way that works now, Thomas, is that if you send an email and there's 2 PDF files, it will try to process these 2 PDF files as a bill. So we don't have the functionality yet where we would be able to say, okay, this is a bill, this is a timesheet, and then attach the timesheet. That's something you would need to do separately. It is on our roadmap. We have some more, we call it pre-scanning options available, where you have a way to say, okay, this is actually a bill. this is a timesheet. Right now, you would need to manage that by how you forward those PDFs into the system. We saw only the easy way. How is this posting against approved PO? Yeah, fair enough. Absolutely true. Like I didn't show full PO billing because of time constraint, right? Like if you want to show sort of N approvals and zone capture, the best way to, or the easiest way to do that in one flow is to show it based on standalone bills. More than happy to show you how that works with PO billings as well. There's also maybe, Martin, in sort of our post email follow-up, we can even include like a link. We have plenty of webinars where we just did zone capture, where we focused on that process as well. You can try to see if we include maybe a link to that in the post-event email, so you can see how that goes. But we have functionality covering that. It's just we didn't have the time to go over that in today's session. Then the question from Anya: is there automatic routing of approval, e.g., if a user changes a department on the transactions, will it be routed to a new approver? So if you, not by default, like if you would change a department, you would need to re-trigger that transactions for approval routing. So the person changing it would then need to re-trigger that, that process. Right now, it's only automatically re-triggered based on an amount change, which I showed when we covered the functionality of the configuration record. I think that those are the questions from.
Yeah, another one.
The Q&A.
Is it also possible to run approvals on vendor payment transactions?
Not yet, but it will be. Like what I mentioned, we're extending the supported transactions. At the moment, we don't have vendor payment covered yet, but it is on our. I think it's even on the list for sort of the next update to be like one of the first new ones to be covered. So it will come. Yeah.
Bulk approvals you mentioned.
I'll just sneak in the other one from Anya. Yeah, Anya, that's a great question. So I didn't, that is a part of the application. I didn't cover that because like I said, there's a lot to cover, but if the transaction is created by zone capture, there's a configuration option where you can say, hey, if a bill is created from a purchase order, then skip those for routing of approval. That's a checkbox you can set, and then those will not be routed for approval. So that's the option we have. You can say exclude bills for approval if they come from a purchase order.
Okay. I think that's it. Spot on.
Perfect.
Almost.
Well, if any other questions come up still, guys, I'm available also after. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Martin. He knows where to find me. Then, Martin, thank you so much for giving me the time, and I'll give you the final word to wrap us up.
Thank you for showing us the tool again, and yeah, please be in touch. Have a great day, and wait for the next webinar to come. And sign up for DOAC, please, please, please. Don't forget that. All right. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
We'll see.
Thanks, everyone.
You will see Zone and Jurian at DOAC as well with a few nice topics. I can promise.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Have a nice week. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.